What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video covering UFC 299 O'Malley versus Vera 2. Today the fighters did their media day interviews, so we're just going to go over the answers that they had to some of those questions, kind of cover some of the important stuff, some funny stuff. And honestly, it was really inconsistent. Some of these interviews were super good, and some of them were super dog shit. So the content is not up to me today. It was up to the reporters. So if there's any section of this video that sucks, you can blame them, not me. Let's go ahead and start out. Get your dongs out, boys. It's Song Yadong fight week. My boy looking fresh as fuck with this blonde haircut, too. We gotta appreciate and respect that. We will look at Petr Yan's haircut too in the next slide. One thing I have immediately underlined, he hasn't fought on a pay-per-view since 2021. I want to say it was like UFC 265 when was that Gone versus Lewis? Lord, that's how long it's been since he's been on a pay-per-view. You know this kid can thump. He's going to be wanting to really make it live for that crowd and hear them pop for him. Thinks this is the biggest fight of his career. He wasn't really taking Yan lightly either, and that's one thing that I underlined here, so we'll talk about it kind of here, is that like a lot of reporters were asking questions being dismissive of Petr Yan. One reporter asked, like, is this the best time you could be fighting Petr Yan since he's on such a skid? All this stuff, and Song Yadong really wasn't vibing with it at all. He said that he's going to be a dangerous opponent and that he's not taking him lightly. That was a lot of the takeaways that I had from it. He also wants that smoke with Chito Vera, but who doesn't? Everybody has a win over Chito. Corey Sandhagen's got a win over Chito. Song Yadong's got a win over Chito. My grandma probably has a win over Chito Vera that I'm just not aware of, to be honest with you. So that was part of his interview as well. If you watched my in-depth predictions video yesterday, you'd already know he wants to show off his boxing against Yan. So if you haven't seen that video for some reason, go check that out as well. But he talked about that in this video as well, and talked about how he really wanted to prove that he's the best boxer in the bantamweight division, because for such a long time people have talked about Petr Yan as the best boxer in the division. And then he also said this quote. Reportedly, he was smoking a backwoods while he said it, and he said, "We getting this one back for Uriah. Petr Yan gonna wake up on Monday morning with a concussion, a hospital bill, and a PFL contract, and that's on gang." So that's what we're looking forward to with Song Yadong. Pretty great scrum from him so far, and you can see Petr Yan in the future laying here on the canvas. So here's Petr Yan. He looked the same as this haircut when he got brutalized by the machine, Merab Dvalishvili. Merab wasn't at the press conference, but we will talk about Merab later as well, because he got brought up by both of the headliners in their questions. But yeah, same tired ass haircut. He's been out for a year after getting ragdolled by Merab, and they asked him if that was his decision. He did say yes. I don't think I put anything down about it, but it was also revealed by him in this that there was never any like actual contract or anything for him to fight Song Yadong. Back when it was rumored that he might be the opponent, when Song Yadong ended up fighting Chris Gutierrez instead at the end of last year. He said that he was never actually going to take a fight like that or anything. So I don't know if it was offered to him and he just said no, if he was in talks but never really seriously considering it or what, but that is something that he talked about here as well. When they asked him about boxing, he like the same kind of question they asked Song Yadong about proving who's the better boxer in the matchup. He essentially said, like, who has Song Yadong fought, which is really a lot coming from Petr Yan, because I feel like I and a lot of other people have overrated his bantamweight resume. It's a great resume, don't get me wrong, but who the fuck have you boxed, Petr Yan? Does he have like some win in sparring over Floyd that we're not aware of or something? Like, bro was really talking out of his ass on that one. That was pretty crazy when he was talking about that. And then he was talking even more crazy on this next part. He decided that he was going to throw some shade at Suga, and he was saying that Suga is essentially ducking top contenders, only calling out people that he can win against. And if you want to say that with the case of Chito Vera, I totally understand where you're coming from on that. But then he implied that he was one of those people, when realistically it's either Corey Sandhagen that he's ducking, or it's Merab Dvalishvili that he's ducking. And we'll get into the discussion of that later on when we talk about Suga at the end of the video. But he's not ducking you, Peter, because he already beat you and still have the 3 other people in your last 5 fights. So it's not like this crazy thing where he doesn't want to fight you because he's terrified of you. He did win. And whether you think that Suga won or lost that fight is irrelevant, because he took that fight, he won that fight, and I don't think that he would shy away from taking it again, considering the fact that he did get the win. So that was crazy too. To act like he's getting ducked by a guy who literally has a win over him is pretty insane. And then, yeah, there was, like, no questions about Song Yadong, pretty much, like, at all, and any questions there was, Jan answered so uninterestingly that there's not really any point talking about them. He wants rematches with Suga and Merab, tough shit, because they're both way better than him, so he's never going to get those fights anymore. And then, he was talking about Tapuria, too. Like, I don't get what the fuck he's on in this interview, but let's move on to Jack Della Maddalena. And to be honest with you, I'm not certain if I've ever heard anyone less enthusiastic to be in the UFC and be a UFC fighter before. And I don't know if it's just because, like, he's drained for his weight cuts. I know that, like, he's been drained kind of around weight cutting time before. And obviously every fighter will get that way to some extent. But he is just so milquetoast about everything. It's crazy. Like, they're like, so is this the biggest fight of your career? You know, how do you feel here? And he's like, yeah, biggest fight of my career. Don't feel any different than any other fight. It's like, it doesn't even feel like he wants to be there. And I like this guy too. Like, it's not like I'm just, like, here to shit on Jack Della Maddalena. If you watch my predictions video yesterday, I'm picking him. I generally like the dude. I think he's super fun to watch, but he's just like, he when he was building his character, took all of the skill points that were supposed to go into charisma and put them into boxing instead. It's the only explanation. One line I liked from him was, if he can't beat Burns, he can't beat Champ. So I like the mentality he's going into this fight with, that he really needs to prove himself against Gilbert if he ever wants to accomplish stuff in this division. So I thought that was good. And then he also wants to get back to his finishing ways, coming off of 2 split decisions in a row, and he was for a while on a good little finishing streak there, getting some really nasty knockouts too on the trek. And just another example of how uninteresting how he talks about things was, when he was talking about the main event, the best thing that he could muster to say about it is that he thinks that it would be a good fight, and the first one happened how it happened. That direct quotes, that's what he said about the fight. It was absurd. But, yeah, I've never seen anyone less enthusiastic before about anything. And here's a quote from him: "Gilbert be more fucked up than my nose" on Saturday night. So, there you go. Gilbert Burns, really hard to not like Gilbert. I kind of came into this one not liking Gilbert because of the bummy ass things he was saying about Bilal not deserving a title shot. And, you know, there was a period of time where I really enjoyed shitting on Bilal as well. I think everyone has, and I think to an extent we probably will continue to. But 2024 is the year of supporting Bilal to get a title shot and supporting Merab to get a title shot, even if those title fights are boring, because Merab's last fight wasn't boring, for sure. I don't think that a fight between him and Suga will be boring. And even if Bilal Leon Edwards could be the most boring title fight that's possibly on the books right now for you to book in really any division, it's still a fight that needs to happen. Because if we want to pretend that the UFC has any semblance of meritocracy, that's a fight that has to happen. But he starts off this and immediately says that he remembers when he was coming up the rankings and a guy let him, you know, skip ahead and take that fight to get into the elite level, and that he wasn't going to be the guy to say no to someone like JDM who deserves that step up. And you just love to hear that. So it's so hard to dislike Gilbert Burns. He's such a chill dude with such a good vibe, and he seems to be very realistic, taking JDM super seriously in this matchup as well. And while he was talking about how tough JDM is going to be, he did predict in that line that he would get a finish on the ground. So if you're confident in Burns in this matchup, you might look to pursue him by submission, because it seems like the grappling is going to play a role for him in this fight for sure. Sorry, I have to fuck with my mic. I don't know what's doing, but okay, we should be good now, hopefully. Then he also talked about some of the injuries that he specifically picked up in that Bilal fight, the deltoid, the trapezius muscle, and the AC joint, and all of those had to be rehabbed. It was a really slow process, which is why he hasn't fought since April of last year. And he did backtrack on that bummy shit that he was saying about the Bilal title shot, and still talked a little bit of shit while he did it, saying that even though he doesn't find Bilal very entertaining at all, he does think that he deserves it. So that was great to see. I think that's what we need to see everyone doing, so that there's some pressure on Dana and on the UFC brass to make that fight, instead of offering fucking Khamzat Chimaev to Leon Edwards in 2024. If you want to book that fight back in 2022 6 times for it to fall out every single time, go ahead. But in 2024, let's not hold up the welterweight division over something like that, when we already took a year to see Colby Covington waste a title shot. I'm not trying to see some more stupid shit again. And then one thing too, I don't think that this is going to factor in hugely, but it could. Last time that he was in Miami, he didn't really get to experience that hometown effect. But this time he's going to be fighting Jack Della Maddalena. There's not going to be any like pop for Jack Della Maddalena in Miami compared to Gilbert Burns, who lives there. So he's going to get his hometown pop here, unlike when he was fighting Cornbread. So that should be pretty cool for Gilbert, and could fire him up, make him want to get that finish in front of his hometown crowd here. Alrighty, let's move on to MVP, and this was crazy. I had to start watching him on 2x speed. It was a good idea in general. I should have been doing it the whole time, because I can keep up with that, but he had 15 minutes of questions. To give you context, I believe Suga had 12, both of the co-headliners had 12, and I don't even know if Chito had 12 or if his was near that mark or a little bit lower than that. By far the most questions for MVP. Makes sense because he's in a hyped debut here. But at the same time, man, that was just ludicrous. And there wasn't really like a more interesting information out of this fight than, rather this interview than any other interview. But regardless, he essentially predicted 2 knockouts in the belt, said he's going to knock out Kevin Holland. He's going to get one more spectacular knockout and hopefully see himself fighting for a UFC belt. And I could definitely see that happening if he gets those knockouts. I don't see him knocking out Holland. I think a lot of people are predicting that, and I don't know why. Obviously, he's a knockout artist. He could totally get it done, but nobody in Holland's professional career has been able to knock this dude out. I don't know why you think this old-ass guy is going to do it. Now, obviously, he could do it, right? I'm not saying that he's not going to. MMA is such an unpredictable sport, and MVP is technical enough and powerful enough to do that. Don't get me wrong. It's just like a weird prediction for your main one to be in this fight when both guys are so goofy, and this fight could end up going so goofy. I don't know why that's a lot of people's go-to prediction here. But I could see him getting 2 really big wins in the UFC welterweight division, and them having a fantastic opportunity to book 2 guys from the UK in the UK to fight for the belt. He said that he thinks that Holland will shoot because of how the Wonderboy fight went, and I think that's a great thought process from him, which is exactly why Holland might not do that. Frustratingly, I just thought about this. No reporters asked Holland if he was going to be grappling in this fight at all. Like, not a single person even broached the topic of grappling. So great job, reporters there. Another W for MMA journalism. One really interesting thing. So we talked about how fighting in Bellator and just in other promotions in general too, because he also had that bare knuckle fight. He's been fighting outside of the UFC for his entire career, right? That the UFC cage, he's been in there now. He didn't really have anything to talk about with regards to the size of the cage, but what he did want to talk about was how grippy the mat was, and how he felt that that would factor in positively to his movement, being able to set up for kicks and stuff like that. So that'll be interesting to see if that factors in at all, if you see him able to implement his movement systems better or anything. One other thing that was kind of cool, when he took that Mike Perry fight, he talked about how the UFC actually reached out to his agent and asked if that meant that he was a free agent or not, which was essentially them showing their hand and showing that they were interested in signing him. So that was pretty funny. And then also he said that because somebody had to ask about Ian Gary, obviously. He said that he thinks that Ian Gary predicted against him because he kicked Ian Gary's ass, and he hopes that he will lose because of that. So that was a fun little line from him, but I don't want to waste too much more time on it because they already wasted 15 minutes of mine doing it. So we're going to go over to Kevin Holland now. Everybody be kung fu fighting. So lots of questions about like the karate kung fu style matchups here. Both of them have kung fu experience in their mixed martial arts background. And as well, Holland had that fight late last year. Or wait, fuck, was that 2022? God damn. I meant 2022. I'm sorry. That fight in 2022 against Wonder Boy, where that's obviously a karate matchup. Lots of differences between MVP and Wonder Boy, but Holland didn't do us the liberty of breaking down any of those because he said that he doesn't really think that it matters all that much because you can't really get anybody to emulate those style differences, so you just kind of got to be ready for it on the night of, which is fair enough. Then this was asked first to MVP, and then they brought it up with Kevin Holland, but I figured I would talk about it here. They both talked about how it could be the first in-cage podcast because they're both known for talking in the octagon. And I see this either being like super badass if they're like in this war and they just like one of them like lands something crazy and then starts talking shit. Then later in the round, the other one lands something crazy. Like maybe Holland fucking hits him with a right hand. He spaghetti legs backwards. Holland points at him, starts jawing off at him. But then later, MVP lands some crazy spinning shit on Holland. And you see him kind of like get wobbled by it but stand his ground, and then MVP gets his turn to talk some shit. It could be badass, or if this fight is super boring and low output and confusing, then them talking a bunch of shit to each other is just going to be like head scratching and infuriating to watch. So I really hope that it's the former and we get like a giga banger, but regardless, one thing that's interesting, two of the things I have underlined here tie in together. So one, Holland's not motivated to spoil MVP's debut. Someone asked him that. I think most of the time you ask a guy that, he's pretty interested in making it to where this guy can't come here and prove he's the top dog. But Holland, zero interest in doing that, obviously, because he doesn't care about being good at the sport. And then the big one that was really interesting is that a reporter asked about something that was in Holland's bio, like, before I'm done, I'm going to be the king or something like that. And Holland almost answered the question, talking about what it was about, and then decided not to answer the question, actually changed his mind halfway through deciding to answer it, and changed it. And then, so that was pretty cool. Weird dude. Really wish that he would take his career seriously and try and push himself to fight for the belt. Obviously, it's fine that he doesn't want to. If that's what your ambitions lie somewhere else, that's fine. But I really get the vibe that he has like some self-doubt in himself, like what when John Jones was talking about the like doing coke so that he wouldn't be able to like think that it was his fault that he lost a title fight, that he wasn't good enough. It was just because he did the coke. And then last one, Holland's definitely going to get a big pop on fight night. So they talked about how big of a fan favorite he is, and that's going to be no different against the debuting Michael Venom Page here. So going into the co-main event now, BSD riders, you got to watch out because your man's got staph infection on his forehead. It was obvious in the pictures before, and you can see it again here at the press conference. I guess I shouldn't say obvious, but it definitely seems like he does. So Benoit Staph Denise here is not going to upset. Well, actually, it's not even upset. He's the favorite somehow because you Glazers. This is your fault. This is your fault, Lucas Tracy and all the BSD writers. But he said that he doesn't have any expectations for this fight. He's not expecting a war. He's not expecting an early finish. He's going in there ready for whatever. You like to hear that from a guy in this place. I would like to hear him calling his shot too, but I also understand why he's not. He talked about his manager getting him this fight, and to be honest, he's right that it's crazy his manager got him this fight, because when he called out Dustin in MSG, I thought it was a great call out. I love fighters making a call out, whether it is like a serious one or a joking one, just because it uses the momentum of that moment to do something. And I didn't take that call out super seriously, but man, somehow he got it done. And now this is a fantastic fight that we're all super excited to see Benoit lose. And then he said that if you like Chandler versus Poirier, you'll like this fight. I think that there should be some stylistic comparisons here, but I actually don't expect him to be as successful grappling as Chandler was in round 2 of that Poirier fight, if I'm being honest with you. This next note's just kind of rude, but my stomach was getting kind of sick having to listen to like all the French. It's just like a disgusting sounding language. It's kind of just like a fucked up rude thing to say, but I couldn't hold it in. And it's nothing against French people. It's just like something about how the language sounds. Like I love how Spanish sounds. I love the sound of German as well. There's so many languages. Portuguese is kind of weird, but I fuck with it. But fuck French, man. That language sucks, asshole. And then there was this huge part where they were just talking in French. I don't know if it was him and several other reporters, because I was kind of tuned out working on the PowerPoint, to be honest with you. But I have no fucking clue what they were talking about, because they didn't have anybody there to translate the French back into English. At one point they were talking about John Jones, so I thought maybe like they're talking about Cyril Gahn, but I didn't hear anything after that. And I don't think that BSD is young enough by any means to contest John Jones's like youngest champ record. So I don't think they were talking about that. No idea why they were talking about John Jones. If anybody can speak French for some fucking reason and you're on this video, let us know in the comments what he was saying, because I'd love to know. But let's move on to the diamond. This was the biggest thing that happened, period, during all of these. Look right here at this picture up there. Buzzcut Poirier is going to be the new mythical fighter, is going to be making the BSD writer so fucking angry on Saturday night. Haircut Dustin. And the haircut, for my money, has not happened on Embedded. I didn't see it. So I don't know if it's happening on like Thursday or Friday's Embedded, but that theoretically won't factor into the Embedded haircut curse either. He also said that people are kind of reading into the retirement talk too much, because really any of his fights for the last few years could have ended up being his last. But that doesn't mean that if he loses to Benoit, we won't see him retire. It's totally possible. Like he said, it could be any of these fights. He said the French fans have kind of been hella active on his social media. He didn't really talk about like what they're saying, but he said that he respects it and that he wants them to back their guy. So I imagine they're just doing a little, like a wee bit of trolling, you know? And that's totally understandable. Especially, that's one kind of thing when, we'll talk about it more with Chito Vera, when you're somebody who has so much of the weight of your country on your back, like these French fighters do, because like the most known fighter for their country up to this point has been Cyril Gahn, and he fucking sucks. Then it really puts like a lot more weight on you, and I feel like that could factor in, especially in that main event. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. A reporter essentially asked him if there's any side quests in MMA that he wants to complete, and he said not really. I'm kind of surprised he didn't bring up like the Nate fight here or something like that, but he said that he really just wants the belt. That's the only thing that he feels like he hasn't done at this point in his career, and he's pretty accurate in that as well. Then also they asked him about taking big fights at 170. He said that he doesn't think that he's big enough for 170, which is probably right about, but that he would be coming in at 170 like on fight night, whereas the guys at 170 pounds are obviously going to be inflating, most of them at least, up to 185, 190. You even saw Jeff Neal almost at the light heavyweight limit in his fight against Ian Machado Gary in California, when they actually have like the disclosed fighter weigh-ins of the night. So that was pretty crazy to see too. So he's totally right. He would be a lot smaller than a lot of welterweights. I could see him doing reasonably well against some of the smaller welterweights, like a guy like Colby. While stylistically he might pose some problems to Dustin, he's not as big as say a Kamaru Usman or a Leon Edwards would be against Dustin. Then he also revealed that he was the one who asked for 5 rounds. We don't know if Benoit asked for 5 rounds or not. I wouldn't imagine that he did, but Dustin asked for it, as he feels like the better fighter wins over the course of 5 rounds. And then he talked about Holloway Gaethje. He said that it was a coin toss and he would actually pick Max if he was a betting man on this, because he's such a big dog and he feels like the fight is so close. And then the really only important thing at all from this interview, to be honest, because they didn't really talk about Benoit. Dustin's just so much of a star. There's so much other stuff to talk about. was that Gamrot was kind of his main training partner, which is nice because Gamrot is a southpaw as well, and he's an aggressive grappler. So that means that he's kind of a really nice setup for DP to be training with. And I would even argue that Gamrot's a better grappler if we're talking pure grappling than BSD, although obviously BSD is much more dangerous on the feet than Gamrot. But let's move over to Marlon Vera. There was a ton of Ecuador media there, which means a lot of pressure on Chito. Again, like we were talking about, there's nobody else from Ecuador who's at this level of fighting. So he's bearing it for his country here. We also learned in both this one and Suga's interview that there is shit talk DMs, but we haven't really heard a ton about them. It sounds like Suga was trying to get in Chito's head, and he just sent a selfie back of him smiling because he doesn't care. He did also ask Sean for head, which was pretty sus. He called Sean a weirdo for his shit talk DMs, which is ironic coming from the dude who just asked for head. Then he also said that he's going to come out and kick the shit out of Sean's calf, like right off the bat, to kind of try and get in his head about the fight. So that'll prove to be interesting if he actually does that, and kind of what happens if he's able to just pinpoint and just bink that nerve once again and prove that he's the most accurate nerve damage based fighter in history by getting 2 nerve based TKOs. So that was pretty cool. He also talked shit about Aljo. This part was really funny because Aljo apparently said that he heard Chito had a bad camp, which Chito said is bullshit because he has a private camp. So there's just like no way that Aljo would really be getting any information about his camp. He said that he just thinks Aljo is talking shit because he didn't get any attention while he was the champion and he just needs more attention, and he called him a fucking loser. So that was pretty funny. He said that he's going to show us how bad his camp was on Saturday night. And he probably called Aljo a pussy too, if I had to guess. He agreed to fight Merab if Suga pulled out, because I don't know if you guys saw, but Merab was announced as the official backup for this fight, as he should be. Then he also said that he envisions a Marlon Vera title run as him staying in the division and defending against number 1 contenders. I think that he was trying to throw some shade at Suga's Ilya call out, but Suga also talked about that Ilya call out, so we'll talk about that too. He said that it's possible that the president of Ecuador would be watching their fight live, but that he knows that he'll be watching it in general too. So that will set us up for the last fighter here, Suga Sean O'Malley. And honestly, the main thing I want to talk about off the rip is that while some people have critiqued his view of that loss against Chito, saying that it was fluky and how that's not a good way to view it, there's a lot of ways in which he has a good outlook on the Chito loss as well. Because in this interview, he talked about how if he would have beat Chito and knocked him out like he views that he will in this fight, then it's possible he would have gotten too major of a jump up in competition, fought somebody that he wasn't ready for, and suffered an actually worse loss than the one that he ended up taking, which is a really measured take, and it shows that he's really thought about this and that it's not bothering him that this loss has occurred. At least if it is, then it's bothering him to a degree that he's able to view the positives of it and focus on those more, which is obviously easy to do now that you're an undisputed champion. He talked about Ryan Garcia having CTE and being on coke. O'Malley would destroy Garcia in an MMA match. It would be a miracle if Garcia made it out of the first 2.5 minutes. O'Malley also answered questions about whether or not he would fight Merab, and his only response, with zero hesitation, 100%. So I have zero doubt that that fight will get booked. If for whatever reason Chito was to not make weight or have to pull out due to injury or anything like that, I think you will see Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili headline UFC 299 for the bantamweight title. He said that he's not looking past Chito, though, and one fighter later on was talking some shit to him and saying if you lose to Chito, what happens to fights with Ilya and fights with Merab and stuff like that, which was just a fucking idiotic question, just trying to essentially stir up shit and make the fighter mad. But he said, obviously, I don't get those fights, which is why I don't want to talk about any of those guys, and I haven't been talking about them this week, which is true, that he hasn't. And he wasn't bringing those guys up of his own accord or anything like that. So then he also talked about the crowd. And said that he expects it to be essentially split on Saturday night in Miami, with a lot of support for him and a lot of support for Marlon on the other side. He was also asked if he expects to be friends with Chito after this fight, and he said that he does not expect that to happen, and that they'll probably continue to have a bad relationship regardless of the outcome on Saturday. And then he actually, this was pretty fucked up, went ahead and copied my prediction. He must have seen my video yesterday and said that he is going to knock out Chito Vera on Saturday. So I already said that he was going to knock out Chito Vera on Saturday. And if you or somebody else has predicted that, I already predicted it. So that's my prediction now. And anybody who does it afterwards is kind of riding my coattails, which is fine because, like, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. But, Sean, you got to get your own prediction for the main event of your fight. And then, yeah, he also wants to start a trend of custom champ shorts, which I think is badass because those pink shorts are fucking sick. What did you guys think about UFC 299 Media Day? Was there any fighters' comments that stood out to you? Are there any fights that you're more or less excited about after Media Day? What were your thoughts and comments down below? Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm finally going to remember to say like and subscribe too, so if you like the video, and if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and drop a subscription so that you know when I upload more. Peace out, and I'll see you later in the week when we talk more about UFC 299.